Calling. Call a growth buster. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Growth Busters podcast. I'm pretty excited to be back. How about you guys?
I'm excited.
Yeah, same. It's been too long.
Yeah, well, this is Dave Gardner. I am Growth Buster in chief around here at Growth Busters, but I am joined by
Caitlin.
And I'm Ben.
Just in case you're new to growth busting, this podcast is an outgrowth of the Growth Busters project, which all began with the documentary Growth Busters Hooked on Growth, which I produced and directed, and it premiered in Washington, D.C. to a standing room only audience in 2011. And we haven't been able to stop busting growth ever since. People keep calling us and saying, we need growth busted, so we're busting growth. In each episode, we talk about the crazy things that are happening in our society, the things that we do that really are not in our best interest, are they?
Nope.
Definitely
Things that kind
not.
of fly under the radar sometimes.
Yeah, the ever-expanding scale of the human enterprise in a world that is already full, and we talk about global issues, we talk about national issues, and we even talk about things on the local level. And today, we have two really great topics. One is water in the American West. Just how crazy are we? The whole story is going to be a great example of how hooked on growth we really are, and how much we know about looming water crises. And yet we're doing the exact opposite of what we ought to be doing. And then later on, we're going to be talking a little bit about your ecological footprint. How small must it be for human civilization, with about 7.6 billion of us currently walking the planet, to be sustainable? And it's kind of a continuation of a great conversation that we had in our first episode. So, shall we get this show on the road?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. First up, since we're going to be talking about water, we've invited Gary Wachner, Executive Director of Save the Colorado, to join us for this segment. So, Gary, first of all, you're the founder or one of the founders of Save the Colorado.
Co-founder.
What motivated you to start that organization?
Well, we have a kind of a sister organization here in Fort Collins around the Cache the Pooter River. It's called Save the Pooter. And we had a lot of success with it. We're still going on with that. And then we decided to grow it into the next stage, you might say. And so we took on the Colorado River. And we're kind of doing the same thing with the Colorado River, where we're focusing on the amount of water in the river. And we're trying to stop new dams and diversions, because we see that as the biggest threat to the river system.
And you're basically focusing on the whole river, right, from top to bottom?
Yeah, source to sea. Most of our work is in what's called the Upper Basin, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, but we do get involved occasionally in the Lower Basin, Arizona, and California, and even Mexico.
Well, I certainly have my own agenda of things that I want to talk about how absolutely insane we are when it comes to water in the American West. But first, I want to give you a crack at it, Gary. What are the hot buttons on your agenda these days?
Yeah, sure. The Colorado River is the most drained, depleted, and dammed river on the planet. In fact, the Colorado River is kind of the genesis of large-scale planetary river destruction that happened with Hoover Dam in 1937 and has continued with lots and lots of dams since then. And this sort of technology of putting massive dams on a river started really here in the United States on the Colorado River, and now it's been transported all across the planet. And so we think it's time to kind of start turning the story the other direction and start talking about protecting, restoring the river rather than further draining it. Every drop of the river is drained out right now before it reaches the Gulf of California and Mexico, 5 trillion gallons per year. And there's even proposals for more dams and diversions in Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming that we're focusing on very clearly. In addition, climate change and population growth are the two biggest drivers of the future depletion of the Colorado, and the population growth especially is the reason for all the proposed dams. And so those are hard issues to get a handle around. But when they have to build a dam on a river system, they almost always have to go through a federal permitting process, and so that gives the public an opportunity to engage in that process, and that's a lot of what we do.
Why are dams not necessarily a good thing?
Sure. Well, dams block a river, and they block fish passage. They block sediment from moving up and down the river. They block food and nutrients from moving up and down the river, and they also block the water temperature from its normal routine. Rivers flow to the sea all across the planet. It rains in the mountains and on the landscape. It flows down into a river, and it flows down in the oceans, brings all these nutrients to the ocean. It evaporates up out of the ocean and back down to the landscape and down the river. So it's a water cycle, which is also the life cycle of the planet. And so when you block a river with a dam, it's very much like blocking an artery in your body, and just literally blocks the flow of nutrients, the flow of blood, the flow of everything. And so rivers are literally like the blood system in your body. And there's lots of little details about what, rivers do, but that's kind of a broad scale brush at it.
I have a question for you, Gary. So I'm wondering, what do the proponents of dams and diversions say are the benefits of running these systems?
Well, they're mostly after taking the water out of the river, and that's what they do. They take the water out of the river, and they send it to, 75 to 80% of it in the Colorado River Basin goes out to quote-unquote agriculture. About 10% of it goes out, or 15% of it goes out to industry, and another 10% of it goes out to cities. And so, that's literally what they do for it. And they're also, Glen Canyon Dam and Hoover Dam, as well as a couple others, are hydroelectric plants. But, most of the dams were built to quite literally, take the water out of the river.
Mm-hmm. And so what would be the effect on the agricultural and the industries that rely on this water now? Would there be other sources for them to gain access to water like that?
Well, the river is already completely drained to bone dry, right? So there's no water left to go anywhere. And so whoever takes water out of the river now is taking it from somebody else. It's already been drained. And so that's a zero-sum game. But what the issue we have in the Colorado River is what we actually call a negative-sum game. Because of climate change and ongoing drought, there's increasingly less water in the river. And so there's less water to be divvied out. And so people are having to conserve and use less all the time, which they've done significantly in the lower basin in Arizona and California. And so the idea of building more dams and trying to take more water out of that system not only is worse for the river, but it's increasingly leading us towards kind of a political chaos where you just have these legal and political quagmires where everyone's fighting with each other over water.
Right.
Extraordinary amounts of the water in Colorado River are spent in what you might call, at least in a nice way, really curious ways. I mean, massive amounts of water is used to grow hay, and it's shipped across the ocean to feed dairy cows in China. There's massive amounts of water are used to grow cotton in the desert. Massive amounts of water are used to grow rice in the desert. And, it's a really fascinating cultural history, but it's also, one of the most environmentally destroyed places on the planet where you drained a river bone stinking dry to try to make this desert bloom into an oasis. And I'm not talking Las Vegas. I'm talking, millions of acres of of hay and rice and cotton being grown in a desert where those things, can grow much better in places where it rains, like in Illinois or in Indiana or in Georgia or other places on the planet. And so no one's going to go without water if we start using more sane or responsible ways of using it.
Is it fair to say that even though the American West has really it's almost a poster child for fighting over water and really insane policies, we're not alone. This kind of behavior happens all over the world.
Yes, it happens all over the world, and increasingly one of the better things about the United States is that we have a legal system and we have a judicial system. And so when we have conflicts, we generally go to court rather than to war, over water at least, not oil, of course, but over water. In other parts of the world, that is not so much the case, and there's extreme strife in the Middle East over water, in Southeast Asia, et cetera. Around the Mekong River, around other rivers in Iraq and Syria. And so where those are actually multinational, extreme political conflicts. And so we haven't got that far here yet in the American West about water, but, there are people that say that might be coming.
Yeah, and the Colorado isn't the only major river in the world that's been pumped pretty dry. True.
Yeah, it's not. There are others. It was the first, and it was the, kind of the poster child, is where the human society learned how to do it in an extraordinary engineering hydraulic way, and that technology has now been transferred across the planet.
Well, Gary, what got my attention and made me want to talk about water in episode 2 of the new Growth Busters podcast was a recent news story called Parched. Anticipated tab for state water plan doubles in less than 2 years. And this was in the Colorado Independent on August 11th, and they were talking about how the estimated cost of water projects for the state of Colorado to meet anticipated water demand by 2050 have doubled from $20 billion when the state water plan was published in 2015 to $40 billion today, just not quite 2 years later. And that just struck me. I thought about this. Wow, we're talking about potentially $40 billion, and I'm guessing that they're not being entirely exact, even with that $40 billion figure.
Yeah, it's probably a back of the envelope estimate.
Yeah.
Our organization was, I call it was somewhat critical of the Colorado water plan process, and we become increasingly critical of it because it had some good in it, had some bad in it, but what has come out through the process so far is mostly the bad. In other words, the governor used it right out of the bat to endorse 2 new dam projects, but hardly zero, not quite zero, but hardly any money spent on water conservation, which was supposed to be half of all the stuff that they did. And so, there was a lot of words and a lot of rhetoric about what they were going to do, but so far it hasn't turned out well.
Well, what really got my attention in late 2015 when the Colorado Water Plan came out was this chart that where they identified future municipal and industrial water needs, and they identified the projects that were in some form or fashion on the books to meet some of that demand. And there was this massive gap. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with it, Gary, but it looked like if the identified projects, even if they were 100% all successful, and I guess this was predicated on a projection of Colorado population doubling from 2008 to 2050. Now I think they've decided it'll probably take till 2060 for Colorado population to double, but still there's this huge gap where they have no idea where the water's going to come from. And is that the $40 billion price tag, or is that?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, there's a lot of different projects. In fact, we haven't seen the list of all the projects yet, so that's one of the things we were hoping to the state government provide to us. But, really the gap is also what I would call kind of a kid in a candy store approach. So when you're a water provider, whether you're Colorado Springs or Denver Water or Royal Water or Northern Water or whatever, when you're trying to get money, you're trying to get policy change, you put the biggest number out there you possibly can. And you try to, move the ball as far as you can in your direction. Say, the gap is enormous and we need all this water, we need all this money. And that may not be realistic. In addition, though, what has happened across the Front Range, and you all know this because you live here, over the last 100 years, a massive amount of water has been bought from farmers by cities. So water gets transferred to cities from farmers. And that happens because the farmers are willing to sell it. And also most of the population growth and the housing subdivisions and everything is happening on top of farms. So the farmers sell out their land and they sell out the water. The farmers make, extraordinary amount of money doing that. And that's how water gets transferred. When they did this plan, though, they didn't really plan too much for farmers to sell their money, so they assumed that all the they assumed that all the farmers would keep all their water and keep farming all the land they did, and the cities would have to get water from somewhere else. And even, one of my most critical comments with the governors, he came out, the executive order which created the Colorado Water Plan, which said they're going to try to minimize what's called buy and dry, or the farmers selling their water. Well, we disagree with that. We think farmers want to sell their water. They should be able to sell their water, and they are selling the water all the time. And so there's a lot of funny numbers and inexact numbers in the Colorado Water Plan. A lot of it's going to boil down to money, which is really where the rubber hits the road. They need money to do this stuff. And what they're really trying to gear up for is some kind of statewide tax or some kind of, massive bonding boondoggle to get several $1 billion to throw at these things. And that's what you're probably going to see happen over the next few years.
I also saw in that plan that it looked like there was some funding allocated for water conservation. Do you have any idea what specifically that might entail?
It's a great question. And municipalities, of course, cities can conserve a lot of water if they can offer incentives to homeowners, to businesses, et cetera. So you could give money to cities to do that. Farmers can conserve a lot of water if you give them some incentive to do that. So there's a lot of ways to get entities to conserve water, but they haven't really given much money at all to that process yet. And so there's very little of it happen from the state because the state doesn't have any money. As we know, the state claims it's bankrupt or half bankrupt all the time, and they're fighting over what little money is left. And so we haven't seen probably just a few millions of actual dollars spent for the Colorado Water Plan, whereas they did provide a $90 million loan this last legislative cycle for one of the dam projects. And so we're seeing extraordinary outsized money and loans being sent on the dams, but very little spent on water conservation.
So here we are. We're wringing our hands. We're anticipating billions and billions of dollars in expenditure. We don't know where some of that money is going to come from, even if it's been inflated a little bit. And it's all to meet this anticipated demand of twice as many people in the state of Colorado as there are now or were just a few years ago. This is where the kind of the insane part comes along for me, because I find it odd that at the same time we're doing this, the state of Colorado is spending millions and millions of dollars trying to entice companies to move to the state and people to move to the state, because the state's definition of a quote-unquote vibrant economy, is more business being done, more people doing business. So we're actually spending money and undergoing campaigns to create the problem that we've been told is coming. Do you find that odd, Gary?
Well, here's what I'll say. There is a growth addiction in the state of Colorado, and it's almost literally like a psychological addiction. And it's become such a problem that, very few people are willing to talk about it. There's just extreme denial. No one's confronting it at the public level. And everyone's continuing to, at the state legislature, a lot of the local governments are continuing to subsidize growth. And by the way, a statewide tax to pay for water projects would be an absolute subsidy for growth, where all the current taxpayers here would be forced to pay taxes for subsidized new people to show up. And so this is one of the big things that's not being addressed. And, I've had some pretty strong negative words about Governor Hickenlooper's leadership. He's certainly done some positive things, but he's probably been one of the most pro-growth governors I think we've ever had. And so there's some real questions if he's been one of the worst environmental governors we've ever had, because the more and more and more people show up, the more and more and more problem you have, not, of course, just in water, but we're seeing it in roadways. We're seeing, kind of every measure of environmental health is going the wrong direction in terms of air quality, in terms of amount of water in rivers, in terms of open space, in terms of the crowding in the parks. My goodness, along the Front Range, you almost can't go out on the weekends anymore. And just in terms of the impacts on wildlife, et cetera. And so, no one's willing to talk about population growth. And that's one of the things that, our organization tries to do somewhat. I mean, obviously, it's a huge problem, and you can't necessarily fix it, but you can certainly start talking about it. When I was young, I'm 56, and, in the 70s, environmental groups used to talk about population growth. Everyone was talking about population growth. I mean, Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Bomb, and he's been pretty darn accurate, by the way. But now, it's become, no one wants to talk about it anymore, and it's certainly one of the biggest environmental problems we're facing in this state, across the United States, but also across the planet, because it gets to what you were saying earlier, Dave. The same things we're seeing happen here in terms of the constraint of water supply and the pressure on water supply and the pressure on rivers and environmental systems because of population growth is growing dramatically.
The Colorado Economic Development Commission and Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade are the culprit, part of the culprits here. They're spending, I know I can't find the total for their budget. But I want to just quickly play for everybody. This is a little marketing video that the state of Colorado is putting out. We can't watch the video because we're just doing audio, but you can kind of imagine. It's a beautiful piece, but just take a listen and then we'll talk about it on the other side.
This used to be the frontier. Pioneers journeyed to the west, seeking prosperity and opportunities. Today, Colorado has reinvented the frontier as the home of modern trailblazers and leaders in advanced manufacturing and technology, federal laboratories and aerospace breakthroughs, cutting-edge medical research, and top-tier universities. Companies are moving here looking for a fast-growing, educated workforce, a spirit of entrepreneurship, and a thriving culture. They're finding it in Colorado. The energy here is palpable and contagious. What was once considered the West is now the center of a global renaissance. Our rapidly growing international airport provides easy access to both coasts and direct flights to Asia and Europe. Colorado is right where you want to be. More millennials are moving here than any other state, looking for challenging work and a healthy lifestyle on their doorstep. New ideas are being born. Businesses are expanding. This is where the economy is not only growing now, but headed in the future. Colorado is positioned for 5 years, 10 years, 50 years out. Colorado, this is the place where business comes to life.
Now, we're probably among very few who would be critical of that. Doesn't it just sound wonderful?
It's very clean.
I mean, once you bring up the population growth issue, here's what happens. People say, and I had reporters say this to me too, well, you can't shut the door. You came from somewhere else, you can't shut the door.
Exactly.
We're not talking about shutting the door. This is, rabid, luring, and enticing and subsidizing of growth of people. I mean, you're literally trying to lure them from other places, and you give massive subsidies to businesses to be here, and they have lots of job openings, and people are flocking to the state, 100,000 a year. And so this isn't about shutting the door. It's just about like having some sane growth management policies where you're not constantly trying to lure it to come to the state. And so, that's just a perfect example of what Governor Hickenlooper has brought to the state of Colorado. Certainly not the first one, but I've been quite publicly critical of his leadership on environmental issues for a number of reasons, on fracking, on water, et cetera. But at some point, you have to accept the fact that bringing 100,000 people here a year has an extraordinary negative impact on the environment. And, he's been central to kind of creating and luring this growth machine.
But all the millennials are here. It's the beginning of a global renaissance.
Yeah, lots of global renaissance, lots of young people. Now I'll say something positive, too. Here's one of the interesting things about population growth and water. A lot of those millennials are moving to Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, some of the urban cores. And at the same time that you're seeing the populations grow, this happens in urban areas, not in suburban areas, but in urban areas, you're actually seeing some of the water use level out or go down. There's what's called a decoupling happening, because young people aren't going after the suburbs now. They may when they get 10 or 15 years older. They're not going after the suburbs and buying a sprawling house with a big lawn, which is one of the big drivers of water use along the Front Range. And they're staying, in dense housing and in multifamily housing or whatever in the cities, and they just have kind of a little different water ethic. But, they're certainly out on the roads and they're certainly out in the open space, and so there's a lot of environmental problems, including more water projects to take water out of rivers.
Now, in all fairness to Governor John Hickenlooper, I imagine that the governor of every western state in the United States is busy doing the same thing. I'll bet you even Jerry Brown is trying to attract businesses or keep businesses in California.
Well, and I think it's related to I'm no small government guy by any means, but I think it's related to that it's kind of a self-feeding monster, and that you want more revenue to be able to do more things with the government, and the way to do that is either raise taxes or have more people come to increase tax revenue. And so the more people you have in your state, the more tax revenue you're getting, and the more programs you can do. It keeps feeding itself, kind of.
But don't they subtract that $40 billion, in the profit and loss statement for growth?
Yeah, one of the central tenets of growth management is that growth should pay its own way. So in other words, every new 1,000 people that come, they have to be charged as much as the cost that it is for them to be served. And so there's police and fire services, there's the roads that got to be built, there's transportation systems, there's the water that got to be provided. And instead of taxing all of us and subsidizing that growth, the development fees that when you put in a new house or when you put in a new condo or whatever should be high enough to pay for the growth. That's what's not happening. And that's why you're seeing your taxes go up. If growth paid for its own way, you wouldn't probably see tax increases all the time, like we do in a lot of the local government in the state of Colorado, and you wouldn't see these proposals at the state level. I mean, classic thing that's happened in this last legislature was all about the transportation tax that died eventually, but all the people and all the cars are just literally not being taxed enough that are coming, and so the roads are just completely, jammed constantly. So they're talking about taxing everybody rather than just charging the new growth. And so, you just have a complete, subsidy of growth going on where no one wants to take responsibility for actually, trying to raise the price of the growth and charging growth what it should cost. Instead, sort of spread it out all of us. And then once they try to do that, they use very slick PR to try to tell how they get, we got to be responsible stewards for the future. We got to do the same thing for the future Coloradans, what they did for us in the past. And they do it around water all the time, too. When they start talking about that, you just better grab your water and grab your wallet because they're coming after both.
Mm-hmm. I found it really fascinating that the Colorado Water Plan itself actually states the crazy conundrum that we're creating. From this, I'm going to quote from the Water Plan. It says, "A vibrant economy, for instance, leads to the creation of more jobs and to an increase in the number of people staying in and moving to Colorado." Now, if you accept that proposition, that that is the definition of a vibrant economy, that if you have a vibrant economy, you're going to have population growth. That's what they're saying here. And then 2, that a vibrant economy is something that you want or you need, then where does that end? That basically means that you have no choice but to go down a road that will end up in catastrophe, because you will eventually run out of conservation measures.
It ends in Los Angeles. And, I was just in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, and it's a phenomenal place, and got a lot of good friends there. But the traffic is beyond any. It's almost like a phenomenon. It's a cultural phenomenon. The traffic jams in LA. And if any of you are from LA, I don't mean anything personal about it, but it's just phenomenal. That's where it ends. And here's what's if you go to Southern California, you see the end game, which is there's zero water left in any river. They've drained absolutely everything. They've drained the Colorado River. There's nothing left, and they have to go to Plan B. And Plan B is start hyper-conservation, start tearing out the lawns and paying people to put in xeriscaping and start capturing all the storm water and all the stuff that runs off and the wastewater, so you're not sending water down sewers anymore, you're capturing it and recycling it. And that's what they're doing in LA. And so one of the things our organization promotes is instead of Plan A, which is more dams and diversions and drain every single river, which is where they're headed, let's go to Plan B first, which is start doing smarter. And usually Plan B is faster, cheaper, and easier too. Building dams is like a cultural phenomenon too. And it's just part of this myth of conquering the landscape and conquering the West. But when they can't do it anymore, they smartly and wisely go to Plan B. And so what we promote is for folks to go to Plan B now. What I would add too, just to the conversation about growth, I mean, the rivers were severely drained and severely understressed, 20 years ago too, before there was, half as many people here. It's not like things have been rosy in the past, and they're just getting worse because of population growth. The way we use water, the way we manage water, has always been an extreme problem. Rivers in the state of Colorado have absolutely no right to exist. Here's a funny story. I always say, you can walk down to the river and dump a can of oil in it, and it's against the law because you violated the Clean Water Act. But you're a water diverter. Our city, you can go down there and drain the river bone dry, and you've violated no law whatsoever. The river doesn't have any right to exist. And so, there's a lot of serious problems about river water use and water law in the state of Colorado that are different than just a problem of growth. In the 70s, there was a lot of talk about rights of nature, and it's time to bring the conversation up again.
I figured conservation would make your eyes light up, Caitlin, because that's the kind of thing. That seems like a thing that makes you feel good.
Yeah, I like conservation. Yeah. No, I think that's cool that people can, that rivers can file lawsuits. I don't know. Are river rights human rights?
I think if a corporation can be a person, rivers should be allowed to be people too.
I agree.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if a corporation can sue, if a corporation can vote, if a corporation can spend money in an election, then a river ought to be able to do it too.
It's too bad rivers have no money to spend.
That's where they're behind the eight ball, for sure. Now, back to the conservation topic for a minute. So clearly there's a lot of ground to be gained, a lot of water to be gained by conservation. We can all do a lot better job. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I am saying that at the same time, along the way, I think we ought to be, in my opinion, we ought to be kind of asking ourselves, what is our end game here? How far should we sacrifice in this chase for this vibrant economy, or this interest in making sure that we never even suggest that people moderate their procreative behavior, and that we eventually acknowledge that the American West, let's say, has there's a certain carrying capacity there. And beyond that, it's really silly to grow the population. And of course, that cat's out of the bag already. We've already exceeded the carrying capacity of the American West with the millions of people that already live there. But there's a chance that we could kind of let it coast back to a sustainable level. But meanwhile, though, we have to conserve. You've got to shower with your girlfriend or your spouse. Do we have to give up golf courses? Maybe we do. What else do we give up? But where do we stop? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, in the state of Colorado, you bring up a point that some environmentalists bring up. It's like, well, why should I conserve, or why should I tear up my lawn if it just allows, 5 more lawns to be built or 5 more houses to be built? It didn't make any difference. I would draw a distinction between water policy and river protection. Water policy is more about how you use the water once it comes out of the river. River protection is about taking the water, protecting the river, and whether you should take it out of the river or not. And so there's lots and lots of conversations and lots of and policies that go on about how you should use the water once it comes out of the river. My organizations are really river protection organizations. We're trying to keep the water in the river, trying to stop it from coming out, and we're trying to get more water back in the rivers too. And there's a lot of water, and most of it's used, 85% of it's used for these farms. And so, that's where kind of the big kahuna is. You can fight the growth machine. You can also say, well, if the growth is coming or we have no choice, you should get the water from the farms rather than taking more out of the river, because the rivers are almost all drained and severely depleted.
Does that mean we should not be growing food in Colorado, or we should just be doing it differently, Caitlin?
Yeah, plug to support your local farmer, because you can give them opportunities to practice more sustainable agriculture. Like, local farmers have an investment in their land and they know how to preserve it. So give them that chance by supporting them and not huge agriculture.
There's dramatic changes that can be made in the farming system. It's going to cost money to pay farmers to farm different crops or to use water much more efficiently. And so, you can save a lot of water and conserve a lot of water in a lot of different ways, rather than further draining and destroying the river. So our organizations, we're trying to force change by stopping the bad thing from happening. We're an aggressive organization. We intend to file lawsuits to stop dams from being built. There's a carrot and a stick. We're going to be the stick. and we're going to try to stop these things from happening. So the municipalities are forced to go in another direction, which is to start focusing on water conservation and growth management, and water sharing, and water reuse and water recycling, rather than continue to drain and destroy rivers.
Gary, I just have a question. I was wondering, in the similar vein that there are land trusts, are there any water trusts that buy up these water rights from farmers just to prevent the water from being taken out of the river at all, or do those not exist really?
Yeah, there is one in Colorado. It's called the Colorado Water Trust, and they do some good work. The legal situation around water is very different than land. You know, if you try to force water back into a river, it's complicated legally. When you own a water right, you have the right to take it out, but you can't necessarily buy a water right and force it to move back in the river. So there's all sorts of legal machinery that happens. It tends to happen on a very small scale, on a very localized scale, and it's a very, very different than the land trust phenomenon. But there is one of those here, and it's making, I think, some incremental change in the right direction.
Well, Gary, I just want to thank you for the important work you're doing and educating us a little bit here today. And for people who want to find out a little bit more about the Colorado River, about water in the West, and about your organization, where can they go?
SaveTheColorado.org. Everybody's getting water out of the Colorado River, and we all have a shared opportunity to do something about that.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Following up on our discussion that we had in the last episode about our ecological footprint, Ben, I think you had brought up this interesting idea about, well, we were just talking about how massive our footprint is in the overdeveloped world, and you mentioned, I think, that you had spent some time in Argentina?
Yes, correct.
And the footprint of an Argentinian is considerably less than that.
I think a quarter in terms of carbon output.
And yet you felt that that was pretty comfortable living there. You didn't feel like that would be bad news to live like an Argentinian.
Yeah, it seemed to me like a change that could be somewhat palatable to Americans.
The question that I came up with in that conversation was, if everyone around the world lived like an Argentinian, would the human race be living at a sustainable level at that point? And we weren't really sure what the answer was. I think we were talking a little bit about the Global Footprint Network and some of the work that they do. They certainly are the leading organization worldwide in estimating the ecological footprint of almost every nation on the planet, the total ecological footprint of all of humankind, and then the per capita footprint, and even the biocapacity of different regions, so that you could, for example, you could look at Canada and you could say, okay, here's their estimated biocapacity. Are Canadians living within their means if you assume that they shouldn't be appropriating resources from other parts of the world to meet their needs, which is a conversation I'm looking forward to having at some point. So I did a little bit of digging to see whether we could get an answer. How would we have to live in order for the 7.6 billion people on the planet today to not be damaging the life-supporting ecosystems and making them less able to meet our needs year after year? In other words, to basically be living off of the interest of our natural capital, whatever can be renewed, regenerated each year. And according to the Global Footprint Network, to live within the means of our planet's resources, ecological footprint would have to equal the available biocapacity per person on our planet, and they estimate that that's currently 1.7 global hectares. So 1.7. If everyone on the planet was at 1.7 global hectares, then we would be, for a moment in time, sustainable. That would change if we keep on making babies and growing the population, then that would change. So let's see how we're doing.
Yeah.
1.7.
What does that number really mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Argentina, the ecological footprint per capita is 3.7 global hectares. So actually they're living too high on the hog, even in Argentina. Mm-hmm. Darn.
Only double.
Only double. Yeah.
Well, I mean, compared with
compared with us.
Yeah, the ecological footprint per capita for the U.S. is 8.6, so that's huge. Mm-hmm. That would be a great goal for us to move down toward living as lightly as the average Argentinian. I found it interesting that Canadians actually do have a larger per capita footprint than we do in the U.S.
Fascinating.
I think because for the time being, it's a little colder up there. And so they do put a little more into heating their dwellings and their buildings.
Interesting.
But they have a huge biocapacity in Canada. So they are living way under the biocapacity of the region. They have not exceeded the carrying capacity of Canada.
That's crazy.
Apparently.
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah, me neither. Well, and Argentinians are too, even though all three countries we've talked about so far are well above the 1.7 that we need to all be at. Canada and Argentina, they are living within their means. If you said you're an Argentinian, you have a right to use up the biocapacity of your country if you live in Argentina. Then we should, like I said, I would love to talk about that a little bit. Costa Rica is frequently brought up as an ecotourism hotspot, and ecological footprint per capita 2.5. So they're getting down there. They're getting a lot closer. However, the biocapacity of the country is no match for the lifestyle and the number of people that are there already. So they actually are at a deficit. Norway, interestingly, they're living within their means, but their per capita footprint is 5.8 global hectares. So they're way above where we want to be if we just are all global citizens. Maybe we should talk about that. What do you guys think? Do we have some kind of an obligation as a global citizen, regardless of what the biocapacity is of our own region or country, to scale down so that the global average fits?
I think so. I think it's pretty unfair to say like, oh, well, I was born in Ontario, so I can just use tons of resources, whereas I just see a Baghdad on there and I see someone who's born in, or Bangladesh. Like if you're born in Bangladesh, I don't think it's really fair to say, oh, well, you have to pick up the slack for how much resources I'm going to use. And I also just think it's not that realistic.
Yeah. And like borders have come to be defined by like colonialism, and there's a whole really ugly history there. I don't know. They're definitely constructed by people. It's not like you're not like inherently a part of your country. You're a human being.
Let me just put my devil's advocate hat on for a minute here and say that I think you guys are describing ideal world conditions, and I wouldn't argue with you about that. However, there are certain things about the human race that I think make it very difficult to do, and we might be better off to be realistic about how selfish we are a little bit and how short-sighted we are, that we might get better results if we did come up with some way where we just had to live within the biocapacity of the region we were in. And the reason would be because we can see it. It's hard to get people to do the right thing. Kind of a stupid example, but if you're walking in your own neighborhood and there's trash on the street, you're 10 times more likely to pick it up than if you're walking in some strange neighborhood. If you're driving home, you're more likely to drive the speed limit than you would be if you were clear across town. For a lot of people, we tend to take care of what is, we kind of feel like we take responsibility for. I'm tempted to say ours. It's not really ours, but it is so hard to get people to behave in ways that are good for people thousands of miles away or years into the future. I just wonder whether a system might work where you just said, however many people are in Norway, you guys are responsible for not exceeding the biocapacity of your country. And look at the United States. I mean, how much better off the world would be if the citizens of the U.S. just had to live within our means and we couldn't appropriate resources from other places.
Yeah, I think it would be great if the U.S. could get down to its carrying capacity, and I think that's like a good goal to have countries that are overusing the resources to get down to the carrying capacity. But I think there are a lot of countries that don't have a lot of natural resources, and if you're preventing the possibility of only being allowed to use what your set of natural resources is, I imagine that's essentially condemning millions of people to die, I think.
It's not lost on me your point about, whether you just were lucky enough to have been born in Ontario or unlucky enough to have been born in Bangladesh or something like that. At the same time, and I guess what I beat around the bush so much about that I didn't even get to it was that in a way that would be the best way for people to modify their procreation. Let's say you live in the U.S. and you have to live within your means. You cannot appropriate resources outside the U.S. Then your population sort of has to decide what is our lifestyle and whether we're making babies like crazy or not in order to manage ourselves. And if you're living in a country where the biocapacity is much less, we know the biocapacity of Bangladesh is pretty small. The per capita biocapacity of Bangladesh is 0.4 global hectares. Mm-hmm. So the number of people in Bangladesh today, even if they were living with a footprint of 1.7, and they're not. Their per capita footprint is 0.7 global hectares. So they are almost living within their means. They're actually having to import some resources. But if they did have to live within their means, then they would, and in fact they are, to some extent, having much fewer children today. Their fertility rate is much lower today than it was. And if all they had to do was say, it's a global community, we all just have to have an average, then wouldn't there be less incentive for them to say, shoot, I better stop at one child for my family?
I don't think so, because I think like in the same broad, like without ideas of enforcement for either of those policies, like theoretically you could have the same enforcement of the policies that you're talking about on a nation level for the global community. And I think the reason I have trouble wrapping my head around it is it just seems wildly unfair to me that as Americans, we're telling Bangladeshis that they have to use 10 times less the amount of resources than we are. Like I'm on board with the idea of trying to encourage people to have less children. And I get your point about seeing that it's your own backyard, but I just don't think I can agree that it's just so like continuing colonialism and essentially saying, well, sucks, you guys got on the train late, so you just have to live. Because, I mean, even though you say, like, it's relatively close, 0.7 is relatively close to 0.4, that's still cutting their quality of life in half. And I imagine it's already not so great.
Okay, so whose resources do you want to send to Bangladesh so that they...
Our resources and Canada's resources and Norway's resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that definitely we feel a stronger sense of obligation toward people in our immediate communities and countries. So I understand your point about... maybe that's a model that makes it easier for people to conceive of like reducing their impact and could be a great model for the US. But I do think that we have an obligation toward the global community or just, toward people around the world because of like the incredible impact that we've already made too, with no regard for like those people's lives. And when you talk about like oceans rising and rivers drying up in other places, like we're not seeing that and we don't know those people, so we don't have to care. It's not like directly in front of us like our neighbors, but I think we have a strong obligation to if we're being good people.
And also like in terms of just from a numbers standpoint, like if someone who lives in Bangladesh cuts their standard of living in half, which I imagine would have a huge impact on their life, they're reducing their impact by 0.3 global hectares, whereas if an American cut their impact by a tenth, they'd be reducing it by 3 times the amount that the Bangladeshi would.
True.
Mm-hmm.
So we have so much more space to cut. So I think from a numbers standpoint, it's also so much more significant if we could cut our usage in half than them. I don't know.
Well, there's no question that we have to cut. And kind of the big question that I haven't answered is, okay, so 1.7 global hectares per person footprint, what does that look like? Right? Aren't we dying to know?
Yeah.
Okay, so I did print out a list of the countries that were kind of hovering just above and below that 1.7. And so the countries on that list are Melanesia. Didn't even know that existed. Georgia, South Sudan, Honduras, Morocco, Southeastern Asia, Guatemala, Vietnam. Those are the lifestyles. If you want to just sort of approximate how everyone around the world needs to live if we want 7.6 billion people to be in sustainable mode.
Right. I think a lot of Americans hearing those countries identify them with like like as countries in a fair amount of poverty, which is kind of why I was talking about last episode about Argentina as an example, because yes, we would still be more than double of our allotted use of the world's global hectares, but that's something I could imagine more, whereas
you could sell that.
Yeah, right. Whereas I think the gut reaction of a lot of Americans would be, if you say you have to live as though you're living in Honduras, would be, well, screw it, I'm just not going to do anything. I don't know.
That's a hard thing to talk about because I don't know that much about any of those countries or what it's like to live there, so I don't really want to make huge generalizations. But yeah, I can see how that would discourage a lot of Americans based on like stereotypes of those countries. I would guess that there's a lot more nuance there than we would think, and that isn't as like scary or negative as we might think it is, but also, yeah, seems hugely unrealistic to me right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to start.
Well, maybe next time we should come up with a report on where these countries are on the happiness indexes or something like that.
I wonder where Bhutan is. Just because I know they're very focused on happiness they have a gross national happiness rating instead of GDP, or not instead of, but in addition to. And I wonder what their research.
You should look that up. See if you can find that out pretty quick.
What's the indicator called again?
The happiness. Are we talking about happiness?
No, that statistic.
Okay, we're looking for their per capita ecological footprint. While Ben is looking that information up, one of the interesting things I discovered was that Global Footprint Network does have a new footprint calculator out there that anyone can go and they can take this little quiz, which doesn't take very long, and it's very, very rough formula, but you get a little bit of a report on whether you're living high on the hog or in the ballpark for being a good global citizen. Have you done that?
I did that. Yeah, I did that in one of my classes a couple years ago. It definitely made me feel bad about myself for like.
Me too.
Yeah, I think it's just so hard living in a super overdeveloped country to begin. Like, so much of the food that I bought was packaged in plastic, and like. Yeah, there are so many places to cut, and it can be overwhelming knowing where to start. I would like to take it again and see if I'm better, because I think I've improved over the past couple of years.
Well, I had the same reaction. I felt, incredibly guilty, and I knew I would. The things that are evaluated is how you travel. Your dwelling unit has a lot to do with it. How you feed yourself, I think, was one of the major categories. One of the things is they give you your personal Earth Overshoot Day when you finish taking this quiz. And Earth Overshoot Day this year wasn't it August 2nd?
Yes.
I think. And that's the day that by the best of their calculations, that we have already burned through that year. We've burned through the resources that the Earth can regenerate in a year's time.
Horrifying.
So the rest of the year, you're basically, digging into, next year's stuff and future generations. You're basically killing the ecosystems in order to keep on living. Well, my personal Earth Overshoot Day, and I do a lot of crazy things to keep my footprint down. Not enough, apparently, but my personal Earth Overshoot Day is May 17th.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. It told me if everyone lived like you, we would need 2.7 Earths. So shame on you, Dave. Now, they don't say shame on you. But my ecological footprint was 4.5 global hectares. So that was useful to know. Now, I kind of anticipated it wouldn't be great news because the house I live in, we're trying to make good use of it. It's way too big. That's not all my decision, but but it is also Growth Busters World Headquarters and podcast studio and stop for wayward greenies to stop in who are doing good, but and I don't get any credit for that. But do you remember what your personal Earth Overshoot Day was?
I don't
Caitlin?
remember. I remember that like the things that I was the biggest culprit in were like, producing trash and travel, because I'm a college student and I go home on breaks pretty consistently. And that's hard because I don't want to stop seeing my family. So Yeah, but it's just one of those things where I feel like I didn't consider that when making a college decision, and I should have, but I didn't know.
But look, but I'm guessing that, I think mine was 4.5 global hectares, and I'm guessing yours is considerably less than mine, even though you might be flying more than me.
Wow,
Yeah.
because I think I remember learning my freshman year that the average Colorado college student is 12.6 or something.
Holy Toledo.
Wow. I don't remember what mine was either. Yeah, I should take the quiz again.
But 8.6 is the per capita for the U.S. So
Right.
that makes me feel like, okay, well, at least I'm better than average.
Yeah.
And working on it by the day. In fact, a week ago, I started my new campaign to leave the car in the garage and get on my new bicycle.
Nice.
Now, if I was a true eco-hero, it wouldn't be a new bicycle, it would be a used bicycle, because buying used is, uses fewer resources. But there are a number of reasons that I decided to go new, one of which was I really wanted to buy local from a really good bike shop, and number two, I really needed really good purchase advice because I wanted to make sure that this was a success and that I didn't try riding my bike for a few weeks and then give it up. So just a week ago, my wife Ruth, she rides hundreds of miles on her bicycle every week, she took me out and we rode downtown because she wanted to show me the route, which she showed you, Caitlin, when you started commuting by bicycle over here at the beginning of the summer. So I learned the route to downtown and back from the house. And I kind of expected this, but it was really cool to see things that I never see driving around in a car.
Yeah. The highlight of my summer days every single day was seeing the bunnies and the wildlife on the bike to work. And I just, everyone should ride their bike. You notice so many things.
We live up a pretty steep hill, and so that's the hard part and the reason that it's taken me this long to finally pull the trigger on this. So I only had to stop twice on the way up the hill, which I think wasn't too bad.
That's not bad.
But boy, what I discovered was the bicycle's geared really low, so I probably could have kept riding, but it was like running a sprint. I was pedaling so fast to just go, a foot per second or something like that I just discovered I didn't have the lung capacity.
Right.
Because I'm in fairly good cardiovascular shape, but I never run a sprint. I don't do that. And so then today I went to the gym and I thought, well, in the old days, I would have driven the car to the gym and then burned a little bit of electricity and spent time getting my cardio. After I did weights, I would get cardio on a exercycle or elliptical. And I thought, I don't have to do that anymore. I'm going to get my cardio on the bicycle riding to and from the gym. So I rode my bike to the gym and then rode my bike back. And I only had to stop. I only had to stop once coming up the hill to the house, and once on another hill farther down. So I felt pretty good about that. And it only took me 15 minutes to get to the gym, maybe 5 minutes longer than driving, because that was the downhill part. But
right.
Anyway, so I'll report to you guys every now and then on how I'm doing with the bicycle, but I'm pretty jazzed. I'm pretty convinced that I'm going to enjoy it enough and feel good enough about it. And if somehow the Global Footprint Network can measure that, then I'll be able to give you an even better report on when Earth Overshoot Day is for Dave Gardner.
Yeah.
Ben, did you find what we were looking for?
Yes, I did. The global footprint, the hectares per capita for Bhutan are 4.6. So not great, but better than the U.S. So yeah, it'd be interesting. I wonder if we could find that data plotted of happiness index versus hectares used per person. It'd be interesting.
It would be interesting. Yeah. I think we so strongly associate economic growth with happiness, and that's been proven to be false. So
yes, you won't find that much happiness at the mall or the bank or Wall Street. Yeah, so I think we should do that plot. Footprintnetwork.org is the website for Global Footprint Network, and that'll definitely get you into the hunt.
if you just Google calculate.
Yeah, that is
right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Footprintnetwork.org.
Good. So right there on the homepage, they've got the link to get in there and calculate. So Ben, you haven't calculated yours yet?
I have not. But I do remember, I think it was 12 hectares per person is the average for a Colorado college student where Caitlin and I go. And that wouldn't shock me, honestly, if the United States is 8.6, just because the tremendous amount of resources that go into heating all those buildings at our school and providing food for everyone. And one thing that I think is particularly ridiculous is that we talk a big game about being very environment friendly, but yet we have all these green Kentucky bluegrass lawns and we use so much water to irrigate all of them. And I wonder how much water we would save by xeriscaping that.
Well, not to mention that it's a private college. It's not inexpensive to attend, so it's a fairly well-to-do population, a lot of the students. And it's pretty hard to live today's, wealthy. The lifestyle of the rich and not necessarily famous that's a big footprint.
Right.
Definitely.
And one of the biggest things that CC advertises, and a lot of other colleges, is going abroad. Like, go have your global semester, which, is a thing that both of us did. And it was great, but that's a lot of carbon.
But I wonder about that if we used a net negative by living in a country that has a much smaller hectares per person.
That's
that
a good
if it cancels
point.
out our flights.
Yeah, it might. It really might.
Yeah, I don't know how long you'd have to stay, but probably not that long.
I don't think so.
We live in a system that encourages us to live large, and that's no excuse for not skinnying up your life. But there are some things in this system that are pretty hard to unplug from. But I think your generation is off to a pretty good start. The McMansion seems to be going out of style, and bicycling is more popular than ever.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I feel like I have no sense of that because it just depends where you are. But
Right.
I hope so.
Well, and I think it brings up an interesting point of how, we talk about how growth is baked into the system kind of, and how much economic success is really a weather vane kind of success in general for Americans. And I think growing up, it's so baked into our media and what we consume that making a lot of money seems to be the end goal. And I definitely feel those influences on my life. And I think it's kind of a toxic thing that drives a lot of issues in our world. One of the main ones being overconsumption of resources.
Well, it's getting harder and harder to make a lot of money. So you guys the world is...
So we'll be fine.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, well, you guys, it's no secret. You guys know that your prospects for landing a really good paying job right out of school today are not what they were for my generation. They're just not for a number of reasons.
A lot less now.
Yeah. And so that's one of the ways the world is going to actually guide your generation in the right direction.
I've decided to go into big oil and look for a high money job.
Are we going to do our
Oh, geez, I forgot.
You can think about it right now.
Oh, wow.
That's right. What do we call that segment?
Lightening the load.
Lightening the load.
I guess I sort of did mine already with my bicycle.
Yeah, really good one is for women or people who menstruate. Reusable menstrual products, which were a thing that I found about when I went to India, because it's just easier to travel abroad with reusable menstrual products. And they're incredible, and they save you so much money every month and so much plastic or paper or whatever kinds of products you usually buy. There are like menstrual cups and reusable washable fabric pads and liners and things. And I want to spread the word about that.
I had no idea. And you heard it first here on the Growth Busters podcast.
Yeah, it's a good one.
And it's not inconvenient?
Not inconvenient. More convenient, actually, because you can leave menstrual cups in for way longer than tampons and pads. Yeah.
Nice. I just thought of mine, and I guess on the topic of water, and we were discussing the West, One thing that driving around Santa Cruz, where I'm from originally, you see all these green lawns, kind of reminding me of CC. But my family also, we had a green grass lawn, and so we just recently decided to take it out, which seemed kind of radical to me, just because growing up generally in a suburban place, it's like a green lawn is like part of a house, you know. But it actually, I think it looks so much better. We put in we have a lemon tree now and a grapefruit tree and an avocado tree, and it's just so much more sustainable and so much more natural than what you would actually have in Santa Cruz, and it's also a lot cheaper. So I think that's kind of an interesting thought. If you have a lawn, you use a lot of watering your lawn.
Well, and replacing a lawn with crops and growing as much of your own food as possible.
Right. And it's not even hard. We're just, because now we don't buy lemons from the store anymore because our lemon tree just gives us lemons. It's great.
Amazing.
And as soon as you start doing limes, we'll all come over for margaritas. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this episode of the Growth Busters podcast. Visit growthbusters.org for more information about these issues and updates. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast where podcasts are presented. iTunes, give us a review, tell your friends about us, and don't listen to us while you're riding your bicycle because that's not safe. But
true.
Ben Bacher and Caitlin Hickman, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having us.
Will you be back?
We will indeed. Mm-hmm. I will indeed.
I will.
Awesome.
Some may dream to pave mountains and streams, but not me. I'm a growth buster. Some they just want more, but don't know what it's for, but not me. I'm a growth buster. Don't want a solution at the cost of pollution. They think bigger is better at the cost of the weather. But no, not us. We are the growth busters. Calling, 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 calling. Call the growth busters.